Alright, let's do things a little bit differently this week, because I haven't exactly been happy with the quality of what I've been doing with this segment, but I still want to do it and try and continue on with the weekly anime stuff. Plus, there was some interference with my weekly show this week anyway, so here I am working on this Sunday night, basically going over what I should have been doing Saturday. Anyway, we're going to talk about the anime for week 9. At least I believe that's what it is. I hope I'm correct on that. Whatever. So, starting on the list, I'll Be a Villainess Who Goes Down in History. Finally gives us a peek at what's going on with Liz's power to control people. I like that they didn't make a huge drama out of the Alicia Duke spat and that they solved that really quickly, but still had it have an impact on what's going on. And that also inspired Liz to use her powers, and the fact that we now know that she does actively have a power that controls people. The question is whether or not she's actually using it intentionally or not. Now, I've gotten into this conversation a bit with some people who believe she is actively using it to try and control people. I don't think it's very clear about it. I can see the interpretation they're going for, but I'm still leaning more towards it might just be a subconscious thing up until hopefully we get some full-on breakdown and we get that reversal of the villainess becomes the heroine and the heroine becomes the villainess. It would be an interesting way to play the story out. Either way, I did like that last episode, so I do have to move it up a couple of notches. Obviously, one of the first things that I watch every week is Shangri-La Frontier because it comes out on Sundays. So, it finally happened. Shangri-La Frontier finally got the episode it needed to boost it into the must-watch category, the top section of this season. Now, what actually happened was it went into the whole battle between Sanraku and the top ranker for Nephilim Hollow, and that was really something to behold. There's a lot of excitement and thrill to it that just caught me off guard, honestly. It was a really good fight, and even for being CGI, which I do think fits the game section of it, because, well, they're playing video games, I don't mind the CGI so much, although I still would prefer traditional 2D animation. I'm not normally a huge fan of these arcs where he goes and plays other games, but this one has been pretty good so far, especially with the whole story of his rivalry with Rust and everything, and the way they finished it off, showing that his Fiddler Crab build had some real surprises in store for him, was a great element. It goes back to talking about how Sanraku is really good with strategy, with thinking up ways to deal with whatever situation he's in, and generally weaseling his way out with just skill and sharp thinking. I like that aspect of fights. I think more anime should do that kind of stuff, the tactics, more than just raw power, finding a last boost of strength somewhere in the middle there. Next on the list, the one that has been consistently making strides and getting better. Dragon Ball Daima. I think this latest episode was very good. And now, again, the plot's been fairly predictable with the betrayal and stuff. Obviously, they would be goaded into collecting the Dragon Balls. And they've been not so subtly hinting that Glorio is trying to manipulate them. But what I've been looking forward to is seeing more of the good old Dragon Ball action sequences, because I feel like it's most exciting, most entertaining when it gets to putting Goku in a bind and forcing him to overcome. The Super Saiyan transformation sequence in this one against the Tamagami and that Kamehameha finisher were absolutely great, plus proving that Goku is just out of this world when it comes to physical prowess, tracking the moving Dragon Ball. A lot of little touches and stuff that are the general Dragon Ball charm, plus the good action and the hype behind it. This episode really succeeded, and I'm moving it all the way, to the top of the Actually, I think I'm going to move it up to very good. The bottom of the very good category. I'm just going to skip all the way up there. Because that one was actually a really good episode. Like, hats off. I didn't expect to enjoy this series as much as I have these past couple of episodes. Then, of course, we have Dandadan being Dandadan again. High stakes, goofy antics this episode. Honestly, there hasn't been a single episode of this series that has felt like a slump or a letdown. There was one slower episode in there, like shortly after the whole first arc is resolved, that I get why people might feel like it's a little bit slow or it could have probably been paced faster, not paced faster, or like a little bit more action-packed. But I feel like it's a good transition back to doing the goofy, fun stuff that Dandadan does. And this episode certainly gets into that with like the Nessie stuff with all the aliens and introducing Ira with Akrosoki's powers. Very good stuff all around, and I was very happy with this episode. I'm particularly glad that they nailed the balance of like seriousness and absolute outlandish craziness that's going on with this series. Like, reading the manga, it's always like fun, even in the most stressful moments, because it has that element of, I believe the author described it as goofing off seriously, where trying not to be too serious and ruin the mood, adding that little bit of levity in there helps carry the whole series. It's not one that needs to be super, super serious or somber or anything. There are moments where it will really, really hurt you with backstories and stuff. We had the episode with Ira, and there's more stuff like that to come. But most of the time, it's really just fun. Most Notorious Talker runs the world's strongest clan. That latest episode did not go the way I expected it to. Honestly, I expected that the clan thing would happen. They'd get their clan registration, and then they'd spring into challenges with rising up the ladder towards the regalia, like Noelle had hoped. But no, they get shut down, and that acts as a springboard for Noelle to look into some other prospects. It basically turns into him making a challenge out of it to rise through the ranks to prove that they can be the strongest within a set period of time, within a year. And he actually restricts himself to 6 months. And that sort of determination, that sort of confidence is one of the things I do really like about Noelle. He may seem weak, but he consistently proves that he is driven, that he is qualified to be a leader and a strategist, and that he is thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead in every situation and looking at how he can possibly maneuver each happening to his advantage. We also get introduced to some of the new concepts and stuff, like the idea of the Lords of the Abyss and the Valiant, and the fact that the creature that killed Noelle's grandfather is still out there. That's a nice little touch to it. And the implications of one of those Lords of the Abyss coming to the human world. We also get to meet the number 2 seeker in the world, who has a sore spot about being number 2, one who wants to recruit Noelle to his clan, but Noelle basically gives him an impossible challenge of, I want to know that you're the strongest if I'm going to follow you, and that sets him off. And Noelle also has his eyes set on a new character, a quote-unquote goody two-shoes, knight in shining armor leader of a B-rank clan. And now, the guy has been introduced a little bit throughout this episode, and we do get to see that he is like a genuinely okay guy, at least on the surface. But Noelle is convinced that he's just putting on a face, putting his best foot forward, trying to convince people that's who he is, rather than that actually being him. Let this grieving soul retire. That episode was a bit of a mindfuck for me. But in this case, they sort of bait you in the conclusion that Stree's assistant is Sophia Black. But that was all Stree's doing. She was Sophia Black the whole time, manipulating everyone into thinking certain things to try and conduct her research and all that. Honestly, the more we get to know the Grieving Souls, the worse they look as people. Like, Liz is just an abusive psychopath, and her sister, Stree, oh boy, she is even worse. And if this continues, I don't know how they can possibly top some of the things that these girls have done. I mean, breaking people out of prison to harvest them for parts for a chimera, manipulating shadow organizations to continue conducting your research. It's kind of interesting that the more we get to see these great like treasure hunters, the more scummy they kind of appear. Like I said, with the smart sisters, they seem all like cute and innocent at first, and then you actually get to meet them, and I don't like them whatsoever. And leave Tio alone, please. The girl deserves better than what she gets. She is like the only character in this series who is even like somewhat respectable. That said, I have consistently had a problem with the storytelling and the way it portrays characters. Some of the twists and stuff are really good, but overall, action is left wanting. Like, I feel like action sequences are like watching a bad fan animation. There's no excitement to the fights. This is one that would probably end up thriving better if the story was more to my liking, but it just hasn't been. So, for now, I have to move it down. Just because. Since we're talking about moving down, let's talk about Mecha-Ude. Mecha-Ude's story is getting way too convoluted for me. Characters die, reappear, come back to life, over and over and over again. And what it's starting to feel like is there's no stakes and no element of danger to this at all. Especially with these massively problematic situations like Ordella awakening being solved within an episode and a half. It just feels like there is nothing there for stakes. And because of that, even the more compelling characters in the series feel like they are shallow. Again, action is largely left wanting because while some do have some really cool fighting styles, most of the time action sequences are a bad mixture of levity, unlike Dandadan. And they are too goofy for their own good to really mean anything. And the story just continues to feel like it's rushing from beat to beat to try and hit certain notes so it can, within a time frame, wrap up a story that is too complex for what time frame it's running in. So yeah, as time has gone on, I have been less and less and less impressed with this series, which is why I've got to move it down, because it feels like it's written for people who really aren't going to pay too much attention to it. And I feel like that's robbing people of good storytelling because it's just like, oh, well, whatever, we can do whatever we want because younger children aren't really going to scrutinize it that much. Keep in mind, I come from a time when kids' cartoons and stuff actually had like fairly complex characters and could tell good stories within 20 minutes. Tying that out with an Amigami Sister, I think had an interesting episode. I don't think it was terrible, but I also don't think it was particularly amazing like some of the previous episodes were. It starts off with Uryu having another dream of the future, although this time he legitimately is there. It's not just a dream. It's like he is inhabiting his future body, and it's revealed that he's planning to get certified as a priest and a doctor, and then get married to all three of the sisters. So it really is sort of like setting up that harem ending, but I'm not quite convinced because it feels too good to be true. So I do not know if that's actually going to be how it turns out, but I won't mind it either way because harem endings have never really bothered me in particular. On one hand, with the future stuff, it's kind of nice to see where things are going, but it also sort of can ruin the intrigue of how certain character arcs play out. I feel like it's too spoilery to look into the future and see these things. Obviously, if you want to do, like, in my opinion, I should say, if you want to do these sort of future things, make them obscure and vague like the previous visions had been. That's why I was mostly okay with them, because it left room for interpretation to sort of figure out how all of these things are going to come together. This one, I feel like, was a little bit too on the nose, and that's what also gives me the idea that maybe it's just too good to be true. So that one's going to stay right there. 365 days to the wedding did not play out how I thought it would this week. It looks like it's gonna leave the side plots up in the air until the very end and resolve them all at once, or at least reintroduce them to the story when they're relevant again. Because it sort of like half resolves them, like it gets to the end, but it never shows us how everything truly winds up with like the divorce stuff, with the guy proposing to the single mother. We don't really see full resolutions to those things. And I do like, though, that it's finally getting back to the main characters and their love story. It led up to the very end of the episode like Honjoji was going to dump him. And then it just went straight up to asking him for a date. She wants to basically prove that she isn't worthy of his love, that she's plain and boring and not all that interesting. I think it's going to backfire in the end, and they actually are going to end up getting together because of it. But who knows? Could get interrupted and just get left for another season. Either way, I did really like that episode, so I'm moving it up if it'll behave properly. I'm moving it up one. Now we get to one of the big winners of the week. Alongside Dandadan, Bleach had a fucking fantastic episode. All I really have to say to describe why I like this episode is Shunsui. I love the character. Like, I've always just been interested in him as a character. Because, I don't want to move it up that far. I don't think it's better than Dandadan or ReZero, but it is really good. That episode was a great freaking action sequence. The fight against Lille Boro and Shunsui using his Bankai, fan-freaking-tastic. It's just all around great. I love the way they did dialogue, like even like small sound effects, like Shunsui counting and all of that. And the reveals of his powers. Okay. And yeah, like I predicted, the fight against Pernidia is not over. I think that should have been obvious. And I also feel like there isn't any sort of finality in that episode as far as Lille Boro goes. I feel like it was way too easy, even for a head captain, to be taking out one of the Stern Ritter. I would like for Lille Boro to have been dead, just because I want the series to gash Shunsui, I mispronounced that name. But I highly doubt that it's actually going to happen. So now let's talk about one I've been recommending. You Are Miss Servant. This one had a more goofy episode with some heartfelt moments and mixed in. It touches on how Yuki has never really thought about her future, nor about having friends. And she's always been concerned with just living for the day and trying to survive. And now that she's living a normal life, she can finally focus on the actual things she wants to do, the things she loves, being able to experience the passions of life and all that kind of stuff. That's some good character development, in my opinion. As well as the characterizations for our new characters, the dojo siblings, the school president who is a total siscon, and the younger sister who looks up to Yuki and wants to be her friend. That was an interesting dynamic. It turns out she's not an assassin, so I was wrong about that last week. But you can only nail so much. So it was an enjoyable episode. I don't think I want to move it up a ton or move it around a whole lot. Magilumiere Co-Limited. Honestly, the first episode had me convinced that it could give us some cool action sequences, but as time has gone on, this one yet again has left a lot to be desired from its action sequences. But we do get a look into the life of one of the other characters, the engineer who designs all their magic, and they've been consistently doing stuff like this. Like, we've gotten to see into the past of certain characters up to this point and how they arrived at the position they are in at Magilumiere. So I have a feeling in the next episode we're going to see a lot about this sales rep guy that they have around. But it was kind of interesting to see how he was basically stifling his passion because he didn't want people to make fun of. He was terrified of like criticism. I get that because like doing things creatively, making videos, all that, it can be kind of hard to get used to the idea of people not liking you or berating you on the internet. Eventually, you expose yourself to it enough, you grow some thick skin, and you just move on. In this case, though, the guy is just too terrified to do anything about it. So on top of all of that happening, there's also the stuff between Magilumiere and AST, and it gives us a bit of a show that there is some bad blood between the presidents of the two companies, and that the president of Magilumiere Co. Limited has a particular goal in mind, and that is, well, fighting against the Kai mutations, knowing that in theory, their quote-unquote pesticide in the form of magical girls and magic will only force them to evolve to more vicious and more resistant variants. So he has effectively developed his team to fight that. It's a good bit of world building, but I am consistently less and less interested in this thing. And I think that basically means that Grieving Souls has ended up right back where it was to start with. I'll have to go back and check. But yeah, I've been consistently less and less impressed with this one as well, just like with Mecha-Ude. I really did want to like it, but just am not. And, I mean, just as a side note, I wasn't particularly interested in Daima, but I've been more and more interested in it as time has gone on. It's gotten significantly better. So now we can get into some of the last ones that I've watched. Trillion Game keeps trucking along with its shenanigans. I butchered that word, sorry. Now I've been watching this one dubbed just because. I've been watching just about everything else here subbed, but this one I've been watching dubbed so that I can watch a couple of things while like prepping for streams and all that kind of stuff. So as they are now, the team is developing that fake AI, and now Haru's attempting to sell that quote-unquote product. And I can't exactly say I follow everything Haru is planning, but he seems to have a really good sense of how to make money and how to work people over, so to speak. He doesn't seem terribly malicious or anything in that, but it just like he understands how people tick very well, and he knows what he needs and when to act and how to acquire what he wants. The dude's smart, basically. Not like tech smart like Gaku is, or book smart like their new president, Rin. But he is very smart when it comes to the way people work. And I think that whole dynamic there is a very, very good thing going for this show. I think this latest episode has brought me back into liking this series. And that brings me to the last thing on the list that I have watched, because as of recording this, I haven't caught up on Blue Box, nor have I caught up on Demon Lord 2099. I haven't watched the episode of Orb, and I have not watched Ranma. Loner Life in Another World I have finally caught up on. And thanks to Biggles Metz and Little Chad for sort of egging me on to pick this one back up, because it has been a little bit more interesting. This is another one where action leaves a lot to be desired, but it's still somewhat entertaining. It's still fun to watch. I have liked the story and some of the antics, but again, it's one that I feel like just isn't quite my flavor, so to speak. And that's a very pretentious thing of me, I know, but it's like there are specific things where I would like them to be more serious about certain elements. Not that like levity doesn't have a place in all of that, but I feel like in some series they just don't get the balance right, and I don't enjoy it as much. This is one of those where I do like that it's a little bit unserious, and that there actually are stakes and like things that they're like that the series is doing. Like where I'm at is basically Haruka has fallen all the way to the bottom of the dungeon. He subjugated the dungeon boss and is now trying to work his way back up to stop a stampede that has come out of the dungeon. I like that as a character, like when it comes to the people he's close with, he is absolutely willing to fight for them and defend them, but he can be a bit of a slacker otherwise and try to go back to his loner life. When push comes to shove, he's a good guy to have in your corner because he will fight and he is determined to win in those fights and actually protect people, but most of the time he does not maintain that attitude. So he isn't a terrible main character, it's just I don't find him particularly compelling. As far as the other characters go, I don't feel like they get enough spotlight to really get a whole lot of character development, or the anime is just doing them dirty. So as far as this goes, I'm actually moving it up to the bottom of the interesting category because it's gotten consistently better. I enjoy it more now that I've taken a break from it and come back to it. But I can't say it's like the most amazing thing, so it just barely clings into the interesting category for me. That said, that is everything I've watched. I don't have any plans to currently pick up any of these other anime. Definitely not Yakuza Fiance because it's just not for me. But some of these I might eventually return to because they do have some small quality that I find endearing that I would like to see played out.